It's great to have you here at FMK.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think, what are the possibilities and limitations of using game creation as a medium for strong, powerful political or artistic statements?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, I mean, obviously, maybe I'm sure your students and staff are aware of it, but you know, this question of politics in games has become a big thing since maybe 2014 with the sort of Gamergate saga and so on. And you get people on the sort of political right saying that games have all become liberal and left wing or whatever, which is really not really the case at all. But you know, I mean, to answer it in a basic way, I think that games are as important as Hollywood cinema was in the 60s and 70s. So, you know, games can absolutely be a means and a necessary art form for political engagement. And I'm happy to say, I mean, one of the great weird things about video games has always been how game designers always say it's apolitical, nothing to do with politics. And it's always deeply political. So, you know, the people who claim games shouldn't be political, they should just be for fun, unfortunately, nothing is just for fun, everything is political. And so, you know, we can't avoid this. So I think it's a great opportunity for, you know, and now that games, I mean, are much more, game platforms like Unreal and Unity are accessible. We can make much more independent games. I mean, one of my big beliefs about games is that people are sick of Grand Theft Auto 6, 7, 8, Call of Duty 25. You know, we're much more interested in small independent games. So I think there's great opportunities for sort of political expression and experimenting with those ideas within the art form. The limitations, though, which I think is important, you mentioned that, you know, we must also look at the material conditions of the gaming industry, I think. You know, I mean, some really interesting work has been done on, for example, if you take a PlayStation 5, you take apart all the console, you find that some parts are made in a factory in China with underpaid women making them all. Then we can't really celebrate games. For example, they've got a strong female lead and we say, look at this feminist game, whatever, what great progressive politics, when the material conditions of the production of gaming is so embedded in corporate capitalism and all sorts of inequalities. So I think we do need to be aware also that we need to not only make games with interesting content, but also think about like, how are we putting this technology together and what could we do to maybe make games in a completely different way from scratch?
Yeah, but do you think that that is possible? Because that seems like something that is, you know, how can you work around or out of the system or the dominant kind of...
Yeah, I mean, of course it's very difficult. I mean, but I think there's a lot to be said for things like perma-computing and repurposing old games and, you know, using, you know, I mean, lots of... I mean, of course, any computer is part of a problem, you know, and so we have to acknowledge that and still use them. But I think, you know, moving away from the big money AAA industry gaming is a good idea in favor of, you know, maybe more retro, lower budget gaming that maybe isn't quite so complicit in some of these things, not just endless investment in sequel after sequel, but maybe, and I think for students that presents a really interesting opportunity, because I do think that, you know, that a student could make a game that becomes as successful as Papers, Please or whatever award-winning games that there might be that were basically made by one independent person, and it's not about the high level of technology but about the creative ideas and stuff. So I think that represents a kind of exciting possibility for sure.
And do you think that it is important, apart from the kind of, you know, political kind of engagement or agenda, that it still needs to be compelling in a way that is...
This is an interesting question, because when I started working on this, I was really interested in saying that we needed more socialist, communist or left-wing games. And people would always say, when I gave examples, I'd say, okay, here's an example of a game I think is progressive or something interesting about it. And people would always say, it's not fun. Right? Whereas shooting people is fun. Now, I think that's very interesting, and I have two answers. One answer is, let's include shooting people. You know, it's okay to shoot people in video games. It's not, we don't have to do like what our parents would have recommended and, you know, be scared of violence in games. I think that's possible. But the other thing is, what's fun is we're trained to enjoy. So when we start changing video games and doing experimental things with them, they're not immediately fun. Probably when the first art house cinema started happening, it was more interesting than fun, and people become, you know, we are trained to enjoy shooting people in the head on Call of Duty. We can retrain ourselves, and that is what makes games powerful, actually. Not that they are just a bit of fun, but they actually, you know, they can produce, they can allow us to enjoy different new things. And I think they can transform what the concept of fun is, you know. Yeah, I mean, a game like Papers, Please, like I mentioned, if anyone has played that, the first 20 minutes is extremely boring. But when you get into it more and more and more, and you embed yourself in it, it starts to become extremely fun. So the games can actually change our enjoyment and what we enjoy, and I think that makes them powerful.
Yeah. I agree that's a great point. Because usually you always start in drama or in film, you know, you always start from conflict, from drama. You have to make it, you know, very conflicting, or in that sense, you know, you always engage in some form of violence or whatever. You know, this is what makes great drama. You know, but on the other hand, you know, what you're saying, you know, actually games can be an experience, you know, that are different stuff. You know, different stuff. You know, that can kind of rewire.
Exactly. You know, I'm very interested in this concept of rewiring, you know, which Catherine Malibu works on a lot, like the question of plasticity. And an example of that that's very obvious is how games are used in the military to, you know, train soldiers to be more efficient. The other main way in which games are used in the military is to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. So these are like quite crazy examples, but they sort of show that games do play this rewiring function of the subject. So, you know, when we're dealing with this question of, you know, what do games do? I think they actually do change our subjectivity. And this is why I wanted to work on games in the first place, because I think that, you know, like I said, it's not the only art form in history to do this. I'm sure literature transformed people's subjectivities in the 19th century, and Hollywood cinema transformed people's identities in the 20th century. I think now video games are the main art form which is actually operating to transform how we think and how they are, you know, our plastic brains are being rewired. And that goes for people who play video games and people who don't. It's part of the society. It's happening whether you like it or not. So there's no way out. So it's just these, and this is why we need to be paying attention to the politics of games, the impact they have on us, the emotions, desires, drives they encourage us to have, the empathies they want us to think and feel. This is the things that are at stake here, and it's absolutely enormous. So I think there's, in that sense, nothing more important than thinking about these kind of politics of gaming.
Yeah, and are you optimistic in thinking about the future and the politics of gaming?
Well, you know, I mean, I'm not, no, but that's only because I'm not optimistic about the politics of the future. It's nothing to do with gaming. You know, I think, you know, our games aren't going to solve our political problems, but they are part of our political world, right? So I think that, you know, we need, you know, lots of different political change, and economic and material change needs to happen. Games can be part of engaging with those concepts and those ideas, but, you know, games are not going to ruin us, and they're not going to save us, but they are embedded in our politics and our future, I would say.
Thank you.